So again, we remediated JBoss, we remediated shell shock that would have stopped me in my tracks. I wouldn't have been able to get the credentials that I now have. Obviously, I still have them, and you can't uncrack that egg. Can I use them?
Doesn't matter what I say.
No, again, it does not matter. It doesn't matter. All right, excellent. So we have a pretty awesome grasp of the Unix environment right now. So we have the JBoss system, the shell shock system. Obviously, Windows is going to be our next target. Jumping into the Active Directory domain, getting those keys to the kingdom, being able to get access to everything that Active Directory controls. So one of the main ways we can do that, vice versa, Windows to Linux, Linux to Windows, either way, a lot of times people reuse their passwords, right? Nobody likes to maintain two separate credentials for their work or for two separate environments. So I'm betting that JDO is using that summer 2016 credential probably everywhere at work, which is unfortunate. Obviously single sign-on is our preferred recommendation, but let's give it a shot. Let's just see what we can see in terms of Windows. So again, we're going to run another Nmap scan. We're going to look for Windows this time. So let's take a look at this scan here that I'm going to execute. We're going to just check for two well-known Windows ports, 139 and 445 for NetBIOS and SMB. And then we're going to just scan the entire /24 10.0.0 IP range. Hopefully this information will come back pretty quick. Yeah, great, and we already have it. So here we had a couple of servers already scrolling through, looking like some are filtered to us, but looking up here, okay, cool. So we have one opened. Looks like we have SMB opened on the system 10.0.0168. As good a start as any. So go back over to our Metasploit box. We have another module that's well known, well established. It's SMB login, and we'll show the options that I have set. Scroll up here, a couple of things interesting. So I already have preset my target host, 168. That port 445 that I know is open. Summer 2016, JDO's awesome password. I already have piped in there. JDO's username, obviously. And so this won't be doing any direct exploitation per se. As I said, we're almost done with exploitation. Here, we're just wanting to validate whether these credentials work. Again, I love typing that command over and over again, especially when we get green as a result. So we attempted to just do a basic authentication to this server over SMB with JDO's credential, and we got a success. Not only did we get success, but we got feedback indicating that they're a local administrator on that box. So we found an admin. We found an admin doing admin things, and then we found their credential and that they have local administrator on that box. My day can't get any better than this. This is awesome. So there are a couple of things that need to happen in order to remediate this. Do you have anything for that?
Yeah.
Maybe?
Maybe.
Maybe? Well, hold on. First I got to use it.
Okay. All right.
So we're just going to go into another module called psexec. psexec is a well-known part of WinSysInternal tools. It's been around for years. It has valid administrative functions. It's also a great tool for us to use to get remote access to servers. So again, showing options. We're getting familiar with this process now. How easy it is just to pipe in my target, port, the password that I found, and then again, just hitting that exploit button.
So here we're... Hey, Victor, when you say it has valid usages, can you explain what you mean by that? Why are you happy that it has valid usages?
So psexec, the command specifically, so it's used for remote administrative functions.
Okay.
So people are, folks, admins in organizations need to have the ability, and this has been around for a long time, it's an older way of doing remote administrative functions, but it's needed for legacy systems or for folks that don't have the more advanced configuration utilities in their environments. So what I like about it is that people are very hesitant to get rid of it and to block it because they're afraid that they're going to cut off their admins from doing the functions that they need to do. So because of that, I can now use that ability when I have credentials, especially administrative credentials, and just log in like I was an admin who owned this box.
And because it is a legitimate functionality, it is harder to analyze on the back end to determine if your usage is malicious.
Right, absolutely. So a couple other things too. When I run this, there are a couple of ways you can do that. One of them is to drop an executable on the machine, which is oftentimes picked up by antivirus and host-based detection systems. But here, I'm just asking it to run a PowerShell command, which is even better because this is executing in memory, and it's also using like PowerShell, which is on pretty much every Windows box, even specifically whitelisted for these administrative functions. So again, I have another interpreter session here. And you can see I already have the information on this box, Windows 2008, R2, a little bit old. We got x64-bit, and so we're looking good. All right, what do you think?
I can do something about this.
All right, let's see.
I'm going to have a talk with Jay Doe. Easy passwords and password reuse, no good. So this one is actually a little bit different than the previous two exploits and remediations that we've talked about, because this isn't necessarily a vulnerability per se. This is more around some best practices where, lots of companies, and I know where I used to come from too, do not allow local users to belong to the local administrator group. It's typically meant for domain types of functions. So, is that typically what you recommend to your customers as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Easier to manage that way, for sure.
Yeah. So what I have now is what we call a compliance job or compliance policy inside of BladeLogic. For those of you that are not familiar with it, it's a rules-based compliance engine where I can, I apologize, I'm just going to execute this while I'm talking here. It's a rules-based policy engine where I can configure it to go and check for various configurations, application, operating system configurations, and report that information back to me. And if I don't like it, if it's not configured the way that I say that it needs to be configured, I can remediate that. And more importantly, especially for this scenario, I can auto-remediate it, which means as soon as it finds that there's a misconfiguration, it's going to package up the remediation for that, and it's going to deploy it out. And in this particular case, we're talking about the local administrators group. So what I did is I have some rules defined in my compliance policy that goes and scans all of the Windows boxes in my data center, and it will look for local users in that administrators group, and if it finds them, we're going to kick them out. And the next thing we're going to do for good measure, just because they always like to add in some good measure, is just to force them to change their password. So it looks like this is about to wrap up here. Should take just a moment. Like I said, it is going out, testing multiple servers out in the data center. It's going to run some auto remediation that will kick those users out and force them to change their password. So what we're hoping at this point is that Victor will no longer be able to exploit that, not vulnerability, but that, I don't know, best practice type
Policy
thing.
violation?
Policy violation, thank you. That was the word I was looking for.
Yeah, and just to add to it, BladeLogic, so far we've been talking about patching and vulnerabilities. BladeLogic has been doing compliance policies, like we write all the rules, build and maintain all the rules, and send them out for you, CIS, DISA, SOX, PCI. All these best practices, like on this particular one, they're already built into those policies. And so that's shipped with BladeLogic. And so this is where we think, a maniacal focus, not just on patch, not just on vulnerability remediation, but also on compliance. Taking it seriously, not just checking the box saying, I'm auditing my systems, but actually enforcing the rules that are recommended by these great institutions who've done all this work to tell you, thou shalt be like this. So it's a great way to enforce some of those policies, not just when something happens, but all the time. Just let it churn. It should be enforced at all times.
And the extra consequence of Victor using that local admin account is that most companies do not log access at that level. A domain login they would have seen, but 90% or more companies don't log at that level. So me going back and trying to figure out what he did after the fact, I can't even determine that he used that credential. If I don't catch it within a defined window, that log has rolled off that machine and it is gone. So you're back to those complex security tools and what were you doing to capture that data, but what were you doing to prevent it from even being misused in the first place? It's all about catching it up front and preventing it rather than having to deal with it afterward. It becomes exponentially more expensive at that point.
Yeah, and just a last comment on this is we do have some reporting capabilities on this too. So as far as the policies go, all the information is reportable as far as how you're trending on compliance. And in this portal, we actually have a neat little dashboard that shows how your compliance is trending over time. But we also have some more robust training and reporting. And that reporting will also give you information about which targets were remediated, so you're not just remediating and you have no idea what you're actually remediating or making configuration changes on. So, Victor?
All right, great. So background my existing session here. We'll go back over to the SMB login just scanner. So again, we're not trying to establish another shell. We just want to see if our credentials are still valid. Show our options. All right, our host at 168. Our port is 445. Exploits. Oh man, bummer. All right, so we attempted our SMB login, but we're unable to log in. Status password must be changed. All right, and it killed us. So kicked us out. All right, excellent. So it looks like the remediation was effective.
Another point for the good guys.
That's right.
That's
okay.
right.
So just kind of recap, we were able to get into the environment via JBoss. We were able to jump into a shell shock host and grab some credentials, and then use those credentials to get over to the Windows side. So I think you were able to keep up with remediation along the way.
I think so. I hope so.
All right, and I think at this point, that's all it for me.
All right, so the last thing that I just want to touch on is, I mentioned at the beginning of this demo that we have another dashboard, which is the security dashboard. So how many of you out there are actually security professionals in the room as opposed to operations? Okay, a couple of you, so awesome.
They can all hack at a 13-year-old level now.
That's right, I guess we just enabled you. So yeah, let's go to the security dashboard and just take a view at that. Like I said, we are focusing on the operator dashboard, which is to help people like ourselves who have done this in the past to quickly remediate vulnerabilities. So if we think about what the typical environment is today, we have the security teams that are running the vulnerability scans, looking up that information, figuring out which ones they actually need to tell ops that they need to get remediated, and then they send that information over to ops, and at that point it becomes a black hole for the security guys, right? Because it's like, well, okay, how are they trending on the information that I told them that they need to patch? So what we have here is a security dashboard, or what we can even refer to as a trying to clear my filters here, but again, I don't know anything about a Mac. Referred to as kind of like a Big Brother dashboard. So I have some of the same filters as I did in the previous dashboards that I talked about, but down here I have this other chart, this bubble chart that shows me kind of an overall status of how vulnerabilities affect my data center. So if I look at these bubbles over time, I see on the y-axis here I have the severities going up, and over time I have vulnerabilities at 109 days old. And if I hover over some of these bubbles, I can see that some of them are a little bit bigger, some of them are a little bit smaller. The smaller ones mean that just have a smaller impact on the environment. Maybe there's only a couple servers or a handful of servers. The bigger ones are maybe the ones that you want to focus on a little bit more because they have a bigger impact on the environment. But also you might want to look at some of the ones that are a little bit older. And then on the right we have some basic information about the SLA breakdown. Now down at the bottom is where it gets pretty neat here, is because this is a snapshot over time. So as I mentioned, we have some vulnerabilities in this environment that are about 109 days old, but each one of these bars represents a single day. What activity happened on that day? Maybe I uploaded some scans, maybe I didn't do anything. So I just have some that are awaiting attention. But we have some different colors here that represent the various stages of where the vulnerabilities are at. So whether they're awaiting execution, maybe they're awaiting approval, or in some cases they're even closed. And the ultimate goal of this is to be able to track how you're trending over time. How fast are you ultimately remediating all of the vulnerabilities in your environment? Now, according to this, I would be vulnerability free in 16 days. But we all know that that'll never happen, right? We're never going to be vulnerability free. But at least what this does is it tells us that we're trending well. We're doing well on a remediation over time. So if we kind of keep that number constant, keep it within our SLAs, we can have a much better visibility and much better remediation rate.
And then
yeah, absolutely.
We'll do that. So we'll wrap it up on what we wanted to present here. There's just one more slide. So just to kind of recap, you saw really how easily hacks could happen if you really were paying attention, and you noticed it was pretty technical, sounded super geeky, but he's really just typing the exploit command a lot. That's really what it was, because he was leveraging Metasploit, which was basically taking the outputs of all the other stuff he was typing and putting it throughout the process, the next steps for him, so he could do something as simple as typing exploit. We think that's pretty sophisticated automation for the bad guys. And we think that the good guys, operations and everybody else in this room, you can be a bad guy in your own time if you want to, But we think that you need sophisticated automation as well to kind of close that gap. It's already too difficult for many political reasons to patch with relentless and maniacal focus without a solution that does this, that bridges the gap between this data and helps in the conversation with security and operations. It's almost impossible. There's really no way to do it effectively. And so ultimately what we see is people focus on whatever's in the news. Shell shock. You know, I mean, people scramble, just on following LinkedIn, how many people are scrambling, or Twitter blowing up over, people are scrambling on that. Meanwhile, they've had thousands of known vulnerabilities in their environment for years that they never paid attention to. And there's reasons for that. We think Threat Director puts you in a position to be making decisions based on data, security data and operations data, so that you can do more in a much higher velocity, get rid of more of those vulnerabilities much quicker with less risk, right? So being able to do it, automation. I only know humans, you know, will make human errors. Automation doesn't make human errors. As long as it's taught well, automation will do exactly what you need it to do. And we think that through that consistent delivery, through that consistent automation to start patching again and doing a really good job of it, that's how we're going to win back the business. Because a lot of times when I talk to application owners and business people, their number one issue is we don't trust IT. We don't think you're going to patch well, and it's going to impact us. You can tell us it's going to be up in 2 hours. We know it won't. It's just we've got to overcome some of that challenge. We've got to start somewhere and really start knocking out some of the big threats, some of the easy threats, and get some quick wins. And also, Threat Director, you know, my drill instructor had a saying, you know, quarter, you'll do, you know what, you're not going to do what I expect, you're going to do what I inspect. And I think that security dashboard is really a layer of inspection over IT to see what they're up to, how quickly they're moving. Are they doing things that you've asked them to do instead of throwing over a report? And you don't need 15 meetings to establish this. We don't need a bunch of meetings to establish this. We just need to look at the data and say, are they doing it?